you see people training dogs a lot, in our world, especially trying to do blind retrieves or trailing drills or something. And if you watch the dog and you know how to read a dog, you go, okay, well, that dog just followed your scent trail to the dummy. They're not dumb. They know
No.
exactly how to do that. And I spent, especially when I was training sheds a lot, I spent serious time working with ozone to try to eliminate all my scent, at least on the antler. It was the only thing I found where I felt like my dog, there was no hand scent left on there. There was no scent from my gloves. But to get it where you could actually have that dog say, like you say, okay, there's no trail going to this thing, no scent trail. This thing's been out here for 24 hours or 36 hours. This dog, when you watch him, you go, okay, this is finally how I can get my dog to not just cheat this trail. And it's not an easy thing, but in your case, it's so necessary.
Right. And I think, number one, I don't think we give dogs near the credit for what they're capable of. And then on top of that, we as humans inadvertently train into ruts. So we train them, the same way over and over, and don't train them to a generalized bigger picture once they have that foundation that they understand what they're out there to do. So I think a lot of the problems fall on, my end of the leash, which I typically call the dumb end of the leash.
Is that why you do recovery all year round and you work those drills, not just avalanche drills? I mean, it's just to keep the training varied and keep your dogs, they're going to be on their A game if they have to handle those tasks in all those varied environments and weather conditions and times of year.
Exactly. It definitely, I think, makes for a better search dog when they're used year round, right? Instead of put them on the shelf and just let them be a pet for 6 months because you don't have snow. I think it just takes them to a whole nother level. And probably more importantly, it takes us as the handler to a whole nother level to see the different environments, different weather conditions. In the summer, it's much easier. You're covering a much bigger area. Avalanche drills, typically, if the dog is on its game, they're pretty quick. I mean, you can't fool the dog. I mean, it knows the scent's coming up. So your drills are usually fairly short unless you have a really long approach into that site. So when you have the opportunity to work in the summer and cover, a square mile type thing, then you can work your dog for hours at a time. So they're not used to just working 5-10 minute drills. And then they look at you like, what the heck? I've worked 10 minutes. Why aren't we done?
Mm-hmm.
So, a big part of it. And the other part is it's a lifestyle for my wife and myself, and we're part of search and rescue, outside of ski patrol. So it's a way that we can work with and use our dogs and provide a resource year round, not just in the winter months.
Do you see when you mentioned working just avalanche drills and the dogs once they figure it out? And do you see them getting bored? Do you see your Goldens going, hey, man, like, let's do something different or more fun?
There are times that I think they do want to be more challenged, where I'm convinced that she's recognized where the person is. She doesn't want it to end that quickly. Reading her, I can see, yep, she's got it.
Yep.
But she's going to make sure there's nothing else out there. And it's not a problem of, hey, she doesn't have victim loyalty here. To your point, yeah, she wants this to be a bigger, better game.
Yep.
So I think it is, yes, important that we continue to challenge and change things up. Whatever those variables may be, even if it's just a matter of just putting distractions out on the surface. Whether it's food and drink and things like that we put on the snow, gasoline, snowmobiles out there, all those things that challenge them. But again, they realize that, hey, that's not what I'm looking for. No big deal. That's not a problem for them.
Are you, I should have asked you this earlier, but when you talk about this and you talk about distraction training and building in these challenges and these more difficult elements, when you mentioned earlier, you were looking at puppies from 2 weeks on to figure out which one works for you. Are you really big with your puppies in socialization and varied environments and getting them comfortable in a wide range of places? I mean, it sounds like your dogs would have to be.
Absolutely. Yes. From as soon as we get them, basically, socialization is really all the time.
Hmm.
Everything we do. And as you said, as a pup, yeah, we try to do that, expose them to everything, just this year, you were riding chairlifts, putting them on snowmobiles, being around literally hundreds and thousands of people a day, potentially, getting on a helicopter, different ways of how does she just come down the hill just for her safety and my safety? She can't just be running around all the people that are on the hill, whether she's running between my legs or riding up on my shoulders, all things, or in a toboggan, just
Hmm.
skiing her down in that, just so that she's used to it. So that if you have to do that on a real mission, it's not something that throws them for a loop or they're like, yo, what the heck is going on here? We haven't done this before.
Hmm.
And then, like all training, to me, that continues for the life of the dog. Because you always, when you travel or you have an opportunity to do something, we traveled just a few years ago. It wasn't until she was 6 years old we went up to Canada for a dog course, and it was the first time we got to fly, commercial airlines at the airport. And we went to up here. There's a few escalators in the county, but not that we really have access to, or my fault for not taking the opportunity to go find and have her ride those. But the moving sidewalks at the airport, she had never seen before. So it was pretty hilarious to see her, as a 6-year-old go up to it the first time. She went up to it, put her front paws on, and just started treading backwards. So I finally coaxed her on. Didn't take much, but coaxed her on. We got to the next one, and she walked right up to it this time, put her front paws on, but left her back paws on the stationary portion. So she quickly got stretched out like a super puppy pose, pulled out onto the platform. So just fun things like that you don't think about, but it's something they've never seen and done.
Yep.
So as much of that stuff as we can do is, I think, invaluable to the, again, the end comfort of the dog and what it's willing to do.
Well, and that's just being fair to your dog, is saying not only, just understanding that exposure to new things is important for them as long as you're there, they trust you, like you said, as soon as you said your dog walked up there and you coaxed your dog on, I'm like, yeah, your dog trusts you. Like your dog's going, this guy's not going to lead me into danger. But even maybe, equally as important is anticipating what are the new things you're going to ask your dog to do? Because we hear all the time about attrition in performance when, that duck dog that's been on the couch for 6 months or just training in the soccer field, all of a sudden you wake up at 3:30 in the morning, you load up the truck, it's exciting, and then he gets into a boat for the first time and the boat's running in the dark, and there's all these new experiences, and that dog just it's not going to maintain very well in a brand new situation. And so anticipating what you're going to do with that dog and creating that as closely as possible in training is just, it not only will you have a better experience with that dog, but it's just fair to them to give them the chance to understand what you're asking.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think along those lines, it's also the rewarding that we do has to be, to the dog at least, extremely consistent. We train for avalanche, right? So we're always burying live people. So the dog is always finding live people. Well, unfortunately, in our line of work, that is rarely the case. We're doing an awful lot of recoveries. We will have some live finds. I know we will. It's coming. And they've had many in Europe. But just because we find somebody that's, is no longer alive, the reward, in my mind, in that case, has to be at least equal to what it's always been in training, and probably more so that they understand, hey, the dog's done the job. Yeah, this is a really tough situation and not how we wanted it to end, but we're still doing a huge service, bringing closure to a situation and saving rescuers, potentially hundreds of hours trying to come out and find this individual.
Yep.
So that reward has to always be there. And I think that's where we have failed in the past with a lot of search dogs and FEMA dogs. And we've learned that how critical that reward is. And in those situations, then I always try to have a really positive drill right after that, again, to reinforce what they're doing. Because otherwise they don't get that reward. They've done everything you've asked. They found the person, but just because they're not in the condition that we want them in as people, we're not rewarding our dogs appropriately.
Yep. Well, and so I was going to ask you about this later, but I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, there has to be a mental health component for the dogs in this as well. And I mean, that maybe probably sounds silly, but I've mentioned this in the past. I read about a woman who was using Goldens as a I can't remember if it was a cadaver dog or what. It was a search and rescue dog, but she was finding that she mentioned that if her dog found too many people who were deceased, she would have to run some drills where the dog found people alive, because the dog would get so depressed that it didn't want to do it anymore. And I have to imagine those Goldens out there that you're running, they don't want to find a dead person. They want to find somebody alive. And it probably weighs on them more than we can maybe understand, or most of us can understand, that that affects those dogs too, beyond just the reward, or beyond the positivity that you can bring into a horrible situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, we learned that, or saw that with, especially our first dog. She, did a couple of recoveries, and then we quickly realized that she did not enjoy being around deceased people. In looking back, though, we were not rewarding appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
The first one that she found after we dug him up, and his wife came over, way back in the backcountry, and she started, of course, crying and kind of making a bit of a wailing sound. And as I'm just standing there watching, I realize I'm hearing another noise. And I look around, and it's my dog mimicking the wife. So that was a really good kick in the butt, because we quickly went off to the side and started playing, and then she was fine. But again, it was me not rewarding her for doing exactly what I've trained her to do and asked her to do.
Well, and for sure, and not only in that situation, I mean, how much does that tell you about pack mentality and how social they are with us? If that dog's sitting there going, I did my job, but nobody's happy. They can sense that things have gone the other way, and they're, I mean, maybe this is way off the deep end, but we've been doing things with dogs in a partnership capacity for thousands of years. Like our recent evolution is together. And so they're reading that situation going, this makes me sad because everybody's sad. I mean, it's incredible.
Oh, it really is. And to your point with the evolution, I think that's 100% spot on. We're a team. It's not that I trained a dog and she has to go out and do that. I have to perform equally as well. And so as a team, we support each other. And having to, look out for her is incredibly important, so that she wants to go back and work again. Mm-hmm. And with our current dog, she's now done many body recoveries, and she is equally as happy and goes right back to that body every single time. But we've been really careful how we reward her. So it doesn't seem to bother her in the least. Now, I'm not saying that she doesn't understand those emotions. I can see her read the people's emotions around her. And she then, goes up to, whether it's me or other rescuers or family members that are there that are having a rough time, and, just spend special attention with them. It's been amazing to watch. Wow. We went on one out of state that, he had been missing for several months, dug him up, and then we were asked if we would mind to go visit the family that afternoon. So we got there, and there's probably, I want to say about 14 people, family members and friends that were there. And I got her out of the car, and I didn't have her on lead. And she, was happy, as she always is, gets out of the car. But she walks through all the people and goes right up to the wife. Just, sits there and hangs out with her.
That's amazing. I mean, so you mentioned way earlier how you feel like in general we kind of underestimate our dogs' capabilities and what they can handle, and we push that message a lot on here. And that's something like to think, what wavelength is that dog operating off of to pick her out of a crowd of 14? In probably 14 people who are very in a similar emotional state, but for some reason, something this dog does, she knows that's the one. That's where I need to go. I mean, there's probably a million lessons there, but I always think about this when I see somebody get mad at a dog, because we talk about this a lot. Like, your dog's not trying to piss you off. Like, very, you know what I mean? Like, if your dog,
yeah.
you mentioned being the dumb end of the leash and the dog's the smart end of the leash. The problems with our dogs come from our end of the leash, typically. Yes. You know, I mean, almost, 99% of the time. And you see people, if we're not asking the right questions and a dog's not performing for us, whatever we're asking of them, if you bring anger in, it's just like dealing with children. Like, it never serves you well. It never serves.
It goes downhill from there immediately.
Absolutely. And I think about this, what you say about you learning from your first dog and how hard the emotional aspect was to this dog now that you've trained differently and exposed this dog differently to these experiences. This dog handles that better. And it's not like it's not in tune to the same things that your first dog was.
Oh, no, definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah. Your dog has just said, okay, I know it's the exposure, the reaction, everything has been different, and you've fine-tuned it through your, the 5-6 dogs you've been working with to get that dog in a better place with that. And again, that's just fair to that dog, because you're asking that dog to do something that's pretty wild, and it's not a conventional dog role. And you figured out a way to make it so it's as best as possible for that dog. I mean, to me, that's incredible. What's the most memorable rescue in all your years of doing this? What's the one where you're like, that was just amazing?
I would think it'd be the one last year when we went out of state. We went up to Montana to look for individual that had been missing for a couple of months. It's an area that I had never been, probably had never been within 500 miles of, so completely unfamiliar terrain. A whole lot of unknowns going in there. It's when you really reflect back on your training and think, have I checked all the boxes that I could have to be prepared for this? Not that I can change it right now because I'm going, but how confident am I? And at this point in our careers with my wife, felt I think we've got the dog that can go do this, whether he's still buried under the snow, whether he's wilderness, whether he's in water, whether it's a creek or something like that, who knows? But we've got a dog that won't phase, so we went up there and we were going to be flown in by helicopter up there. Again, it's like, great. We do that all the time. She was excited to get in the helicopter. We had an assigned area. We were going to be going to search that day, about 340 acres, but we got dropped off on a frozen pond, and we had to probably go the route that we were going to take to get there, probably 3/4 of a mile that we were going to travel. At that point, there was still 8 feet of snow up at the top of the mountain. And as we started working, it was a very calm but beautiful morning. So there's a real subtle rising of air up the mountain from the valley there. And there were 2 different times where she gave me an alert, reading that body language, like she's got something, and she gave me a little bit of a whine looking down the fall line or down into this drainage area. Marked both of those spots with GPS. We continued searching and then got to an area where there could be some possible interest from previous information. So we stopped, took a break, watered her, gave her some food so that we were fresh going into this area, which again was right in line. Her alerts, from roughly a half mile uphill, were right up the drainage from this area. And then I let her go, again, after we took that break. And she went into, it was in the northwest, so some really big tree wells. Went into a tree well, and she was really acting agitated, to the point where the folks that they had assigned to go with me we had never met before, so they didn't know her at all and really didn't work with dogs. They said, "Hey, do you want us to dig there?" I'm like, "Nope. There's something here, but no, we're not digging here." We worked downhill, and she got interested in, again, an area that they, I think they were eager to do something, having that helpless feeling that those guys have been searching for almost 3 months. And if you guys want to poke around here, aerate the snow with the probe poles. I said, I'll bring her back, aerate it. You guys get off to the side. We'll wait 15 minutes for your scent to clear, and then I'll bring her back. And I continued searching, working a grid as we were going downhill. And all of a sudden she took off. She ran downhill, almost 100 yards probably, and took a left down into a drainage. So out of sight. And I continued working my grid because she's got great victim loyalty. If she finds something, she'll stay. And if she's checking out something else, or maybe she saw an animal or something move, I didn't know, which she typically doesn't follow, but she'll come back. So I went and did another long grid. She hadn't come back. I thought, well, I better go find out where my dog went. So I went down to where she had disappeared, where I last saw her, started into a drainage, steep drainage, and I didn't see her at first. So there was, I have to admit, a moment of worry, like, uh-oh, where did she go? I went further into the drainage, and I was looking downhill. Well, I looked uphill. She was a good at least 100 feet uphill, digging like a fiend. So I went up to her, walked up to her, and she kind of glanced up without stopping to dig, to recognize that I was there. Mm-hmm. And then I call it proofing to see if she would stay, which I at that point knew the answer, but walked away again, probably went 50 feet off to the side. And, she just kept on digging. She didn't even acknowledge that I was the dumb one walking away. So came back and probed, and, she was spot on, right on top of him. He was still 70 centimeters down.
When the helicopter dropped you off, and you mentioned it's a morning and the thermals are coming up the mountain, slow moving thermals coming up the mountain. How far? So, and you said she signaled twice. How far was she when she first signaled there from where she actually found him?
I would have to go back and look, but like I say, the first time I think was close to half a mile away. Being up valley there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that sense of smell and recognize, how diminished it must be after a couple months and being a half a mile away and that person's under, the whole thing is incredible. That's a testament to these abilities that are just so hard to even fathom in these dogs.
It is. Yeah, it's amazing. And, and it was, and looking back, such an amazing experience for us on so many levels, emotionally, obviously, but to see all your work come together and her do that was, and do it without, there was nothing out of the ordinary for her. Just go out there and nail it. When she started out, she's running around and rolling. And I said, hey, look, guys, believe it or not, she's going to be working, but we've got 2 days of travel energy built up, where she's been on a plane. We've been sitting in a hotel. I said, trust me, she's working. Yep. And then, she works her butt off. And I've got a couple of funny pictures of her after we get him out. And she's done this on many of her recoveries, or all of them really. The look of contentment when she just lays down and watches is amazing, because she's always going. But to just sit and lay down and watch. And I think it's probably 90% contentment and realizing that she found what she was asked to find. And the other 10% of looking at it and saying, I got you this far, don't screw it up from here. It's all the people now getting involved. So
she's going full supervisor mode on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, that is incredible. What CRAD is all volunteer, right?
We are made up. Yes, we are. It's ski patrollers.
Okay.
Throughout the state of Colorado, and we've got folks coming from other states as well. Really, what we are is we're a nonprofit training and validating agency. And part of that gets into all the technicalities of how search and rescue is run in different states. Mm-hmm. So that, that changes from us to all the surrounding states. So we're definitely the training and validating agency. And then we can provide a resource list to, anybody in Colorado, any sheriff's department, search and rescue, or even outside, to what's the best resource that we might have for you, to provide. So folks are doing this while they're working as a ski patroller, but then they choose to join this on their own. And as a member of CRAD, you are strictly a volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Where's the funding come from?
It's all donated. All
Okay.
of it is funding. Yeah.
Where can people find that?
On the website is probably the easiest, c-rad.org. It's probably easiest. You can find, then all kinds of information about us and ways to donate, and some cool stuff if you want to, mugs, belts, t-shirts, things like that as well.
That's awesome.